Welcome to Inside Economics. I'm Mark Zandi, the Chief Economist of Moody's Analytics, and I'm joined by my two trusty co-hosts, Marisa DiNatale and Cris. Hi, guys.
Hey, Mark.
How things?
Okay.
Good.
Yeah.
This is a little unusual for us because it's not late, but early evening on a Thursday. We typically record our podcast on a Friday, but we're doing it late Thursday because I have a board meeting all day tomorrow. Can't do it then. But we could have done it Saturday. Why didn't we do it?
You tell me. You chose it.
I chose it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we're doing it next Saturday. So.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay.
We'll we can compare.
Okay. All right. Very good. But here we are, and this is an important day because on this Thursday, what is this? October 26th, we received the GDP report for the month for the third quarter of 2023. The GDP being the value of all the goods and services we produce, and it was, I don't think there's any other word for it, but gangbusters. I mean, guys have any better word for it? I mean, pretty amazing kind of growth. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's a good word. Surpassed all expectations.
Right? All expectations. Okay. Well, let's dive into it in some detail. And hey, Marisa, maybe I can call on you to do a deep dive here. Give us a sense of the numbers and your interpretation of the numbers.
Sure.
Yeah.
So well above expectations growth in third quarter. Growth was 4.9% Q2 to Q3, and we were expecting something in the high threes, and most forecasters were not expecting something of this magnitude. So this is the strongest rate of GDP growth that we've had since the end of 2021. You have to go back to the fourth quarter of 21 to see growth this strong. And it was really quite broad-based amongst all facets of the economy. And I'll go through what those are. C+I+G+net exports, right? So we'll go in that order, talking about the different components of the contributions of GDP.
Is that Econ 101?
This is Macro 101.
Macro. Is that when I was in university college, it was Econ 101. Was that when you were there, it was Econ 101, or it was called Macro 101?
I think we had to take macro and micro were separate. I don't think we had a general econ.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, for me, it was Econ 102. What
happened to 101?
101 was micro.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes sense, actually. You should do the micro before you do the macro.
You'll zoom out, right?
I'll let them know.
Okay.
You approve.
Was this at Johns Hopkins? No, you got your PhD.
No, that was at Michigan State.
Oh, that figures, Michigan State. Oh, so you're a Wolverine, aren't you? No, not Wolverine. No, wait. A Spartan. You're a Spartan.
Oh, boy.
Spartan.
You're a Spartan. Sorry about that. I know that's
I could care less. So.
Oh, you could care less.
Did you know that Cris was my econometrics professor at Johns Hopkins?
I didn't know that.
Didn't?
No, that is really amazing.
Yeah.
Johns Hopkins, Marisa?
Yeah.
Undergrad?
No. Graduate school.
Oh,
master's program.
Oh, you went to master's? You got your master's from Johns Hopkins?
Yeah.
I've known you for so many years, and I didn't know that. That is bizarre.
And
Go Blue Jays. Go Blue Jays.
Was Cris a good professor?
He was great. Yes.
He was great. I can imagine that. Yeah, that I believe. And Cris, was she a good
Thank
student?
You, Marisa.
He probably doesn't even remember me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, liar.
So then the addendum to this story is that I show up for a job interview at Moody's Analytics years later, and who's in the room interviewing me?
Oh no, that is so cool. That is so cool. What a great story. How did he do in his interview? It must have been pretty good.
Oh yeah, he must have. He wowed us, I guess. Yeah.
Wow.
I will say he gave me an A- on my econometrics final paper.
Don't say Marisa holds a grudge, Cris.
Wow.
I remember the minus.
Yeah, where'd that minus come from? That's probably because you got the C+I+G+net exports wrong. Anyway, all right. Well, we're going to test you now.
Okay, let's go back to C. Let's go back to C.
Let's go back to C.
Okay, so over half of the growth in GDP in the third quarter came from personal consumption expenditures. So personal consumption expenditures grew 4% on a quarter-over-quarter basis. And again, you have to go back to the end of 2021 to see growth in consumer spending that strong. we talked about this on the last podcast, right? We did our whole podcast last week about how strong the consumer is and how strong spending has been. And here it is in black and white in this release. You see spending on both goods and services by consumers was quite strong. So, we've had this we've seen that consumers were spending very strongly on goods during the pandemic because they couldn't spend on services. And this was starting to sort of come back to some normalcy with more spending on services, but they're still spending quite strongly on goods, both durable and non-durable goods. So two of the categories within good spending that were strong over the quarter were on the durable side, recreational vehicles, which are RVs, right? Is there, I don't know. Is there anything else in that category? Like
I don't know.
Jet skis and things?
Yeah.
And then on the non-durable side, spending was very strong on prescription medications. Services spending was also quite strong. You have to go back to the third quarter of 2021 to see spending on services that was this strong. And that, if you go back to the third quarter of 21, you're talking about sort of that post-pandemic, post-COVID lockdown reopening of the economy, right? So service spending was strong. Service spending was strongest on housing services, on insurance, and on healthcare spending. Those were the strongest service categories.
So no Taylor Swift effect, no Beyonce.
Oh, actually, yes, there is potentially a Taylor Swift effect. So, spending on leisure goods, leisure hospitality, entertainment was also one of the very strong components. Yeah, you think that's what it is, Cris? You think it's Taylor Swift's tickets?
Did you go see her, Cris? Are you a fan?
I did not. No.
No. See how he's blushing. I think he actually did go see her. Like you're like a serial Taylor Swift fan. You go to all her concerts. No?
I wish I had the time. Wish I had
or the or the money. Apparently,
I don't know, Marisa. That felt a little disingenuous. That laugh. What do you think?
He's hiding something.
He's hiding. He's definitely
adding to the Cris lore. Lover of cryptocurrency and Taylor Swift.
Yeah, we haven't talked about crypto in a while, but never mind.
Please don't. Please don't.
Okay. All right. Well, the consumer obviously is hanging tough. Hey, Cris, remember last podcast you were kind of worried about the consumer. Feeling better after this report, or not so much?
Feeling better that last quarter the consumer was hanging tough.
Right. Okay. Last quarter.
Great news. That last quarter was great.
Got it.
Let's see what happens next.
Okay, so C, now we're on to I, investment.
Yeah, let me just say one more thing about C, which is the only category that actually declined in terms of consumer spending over the quarter was gas and energy goods.
Okay. And everything that's on a real basis. So that means the actual amount, I guess gas prices were up and we just conserved. We drove less or something. Okay. All right, got it. Less gas.
Okay. So now we're on to I. So private investment was up 8.4% annualized over the quarter. Again, the fastest rate of growth in that category since the end of 2021. Fixed investment was up just under 1% over the quarter. Non-residential fixed investment was just about flat. Residential fixed investment, however, was up for the first time in 9 quarters.
So the non-res fixed investment, that's investment done by businesses, right?
That's right.
And the residential obviously is housing, single family, multifamily housing, and home improvement.
And within, if you want to break down the spending by businesses, spending on equipment by businesses declined over the quarter. And spending on equipment has declined in 2 of the last 3 quarters. So it was up in the second quarter, but it also declined in the first quarter of the year. But spending on structures, so buildings, and spending on intellectual property were both up. So it was pretty much a wash between the structures and the IP offset the spending on equipment, which was down.
And I think
you think that.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Cris.
Do you think that's CHIPS Act related? some of that non-resi structural spending. We're building semiconductor plants and whatnot, so certainly could be a contributor.
Yeah, absolutely, right, because that's manufacturing, construction, and that's in the non-res structures. So that would be, I think that's the CHIPS Act. I mean, I think if you look at manufacturing, construction put in place, so that's nominal dollar, actual value of construction and manufacturing facilities, factories, which would include fab plants, chip plants. I think if you go back a couple of years ago, it was 75 billion per annum. That was kind of roughly where we were. I think we're now over 200 billion annualized. So, and it's still going up, still going straight. So I think that's a big part of it. Yeah. I was going to say on the equipment side, I think one thing to note, and I think I had this right, I haven't looked recently, but if you take a step back and look at a chart of that business investment spending on equipment, so that's computers and that kind of thing, it surged as you would expect in the pandemic because of remote work. We all bought stuff, and businesses bought a lot of stuff for their employees to do remote work. And even though things have kind of leveled off here more recently, the level of investment spending is still quite high by historical standards. It doesn't feel like it's normalized back to what it would have been if there had been no pandemic. That's in my mind's eye. So I'm not sure if that's exactly right, but I think it's pretty close to right.
Yeah. Now with the shift
that
to
is
AI,
right.
That is right, Marisa. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back and you look at what equipment spending on equipment, and especially computer equipment, was like in 2020, I mean, it was off the chart, right? In the third quarter of 2020. So once we realized everybody would be working from home for some time, businesses, exactly right, went out and spent. And so there's been recent weakness over the past year in equipment spending. That could just be this cycle of not having to replace stuff you just bought 2 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Anything else on the investment? Oh, I meant to ask on the residential investment, single family, multifamily, home improvement, it was plus in aggregate. Was there anything going on underneath? I mean, what was driving that? Do you know, Chris?
I don't know. I didn't have an opportunity to look it up.
Okay. All right. That's maybe I'll do that one as we move along here, try to figure that out. Okay. So that's I. So basically C, big time source of growth. I, a source of growth in aggregate, not business investment, but in aggregate, a source.
In aggregate, it added 1.5 percentage points.
It did. Well, that also includes inventory investment, right?
It does. That's true.
It does.
Yes,
Okay.
it does. And inventories were a positive contributor this quarter for the first time.
Too.
Yeah.
You want to explain that one? Inventories.
Yeah. So inventories, it's the change in inventories that matters to the calculation of GDP growth. So the change from the prior quarter. This is the first time in 3 quarters where inventories have contributed positively to GDP growth. So last quarter, in the second quarter, it was flat, no contribution. In the first quarter, it was a fairly big detractor. It took about 2.2 percentage points off of first quarter GDP growth earlier this year. So this time it added 1.3 percentage points to GDP growth. So businesses have a lot of inventory, even though people are spending a lot and buying a lot of stuff, right? We see that with the consumption of goods, but nonetheless, they have a lot of inventory, and that inventory grew over the quarter, which implies that production has been strong, I think.
Yeah. I'm so weirded out by that, because boom time consumption, inventories increase. That implies, as you say, a big increase in production, but actually manufacturing industrial production has been pretty flat. It's not like it's booming. It could also be imports. We're importing stuff that goes into inventory before it's actually sold. And imports were up, but it didn't feel like it was up a lot. That just feels weird to me. When something feels weird to me, generally it's revised. So I'm just thinking this might get revised. We'll see. But I guess the point is, we get 4.9% GDP growth. What was the contribution from inventory investment? Was it like 1.3?
1.3.
Yeah. Okay. So subtract that's 3.6. So even if that's the reality of what happened, 3.6 is that's still pretty
That's
good.
still really right.
By the way, that was pretty close to our estimate for the quarter, right? Our tracking
That's
estimate
right.
3.6. But okay, so that's C plus I. Now G.
So G, government spending, was also a positive contributor to growth over the quarter. So government consumption added about, let's see, an eighth of a percentage point to 0.8 percentage points to GDP growth over the quarter. So it was both federal spending and state and local spending grew over the quarter. Within the federal spending, defense spending was up very strong. It was up 8% over the quarter. You have to go back to the end of 2020 to see defense spending that big. Non-defense spending was also up. That was up 3.9%. And state and local government spending was up 3.7%, which was a bit softer than it's been all year. But still, all branches of government spend out there spending money and adding positively to GDP growth.
So, and that goes to CHIPS Act, the Infrastructure Law, maybe the Inflation Reduction Act, although it might be premature for that. And of course, defense spending, it feels like that's going to continue for some time here, given geopolitical events. Yeah.
Right. I mean, we've had a lot of aid going to Ukraine, and now we're likely to get even more of that with Israel.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of juice from C, some juice from I, fair amount of juice from G. What about net exports? That's the last term in that identity.
So net exports were the only detraction here from growth. So of all of these categories, net exports were detracted a very small amount, though. We're looking at 0.08 percentage points from growth.
0.08. 0.08.
Yeah, 0.08.
I think I'd round that to 0. Just saying.
Mm-hmm. 0.08. You could, yes.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, got it.
So this was the only category where this wasn't a help to GDP. Yeah.
And it was, is it imports plus? I mean, both were up. Exports were up. Imports were up. But the net of that was no change.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're good. Okay, so that's the nuts and bolts of it. What's your interpretation of it? What does it mean? For the where the economy is and where it's headed.
And I should also say year over year, GDP was up 2.9%. So we're looking at growth that is well above the economy's potential here. Okay. My interpretation is the same thing we were talking about last week, right? I mean, consumers still have a lot of spending power here, and they are propping up much of the economy. I think the fact that inflation is on a clear downward trajectory and has been moderating for now the past year plus is giving them more of a wherewithal to spend. And I think that's what we've seen over the last couple quarters here. I mean, even just compared to where we were a year ago or at the beginning of this year, inflation is down significantly.
So you're just to summarize, you're saying, okay, inflation was a problem. It still is a problem, but it's much less of a problem. It's come in, and that's helped to support the purchasing power of American consumers, and they're using that to continue to spend. And they spent strongly in the third quarter, and that's the key reason why, and really in the first half of this year, the key reason why the economy is growing as well as it is. That's the fundamental reason for that strong growth. That's
what I believe.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Cris, what do you think? You want to fill in any gaps there in Marissa's rundown of the GDP, and what's your interpretation of the numbers?
Well, first of all, I think was an A+ report.
There you go,
Marisa. Oh, not an A-, huh?
And I honestly do agree that it reflects the strength of the consumer. Consumers really are continuing to drive the bus. The inventories number, as kind of mentioned, it's a little bit of noise to me. Even if it's right, it tends to be volatile. I worry about the shopping cycles being scrambled here. So who knows, right? What's going on there? But clearly relying on the consumer here. The investment, I thought, that's somewhat troubling, I guess, in the sense that you do want investment to pick up more of the water, carry more of the water, I guess here. So, I don't see that as a negative, because the residential investment actually picked up after a long string of negative growth. So something to watch. But if we're thinking about more of a sustainable growth path, right, you do want to see investment kicking in a bit more. But so because we are so heavily leveraged on the consumer right now.
Right. So
good report.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
But it does hang very heavily on consumers, and was the third quarter a summer of spending, right, where we did go to the Taylor Swift concert and do a lot of other spending, and that will pass now as we start to face more and more headwinds.
Right.
I think that's the case. This is, for me, it's a one-time burst of activity here. We should be prepared for some slowing, not negative necessarily, but
right,
certainly a repeat of this would be
what
a
about
heroic assumption.
That's a good way of thinking, a good frame in terms of thinking about it. I mean, obviously the consumer is like key, right? 70% of the economy, that drives the train. So if that's consumers are doing their part, the rest of it doesn't matter nearly as much. I mean, it's a necessary condition. Okay. And on the the business investment, that does feel flattish. I'm not sure we're going to get a lot of juice from there one way or the other. I think that's from memory 10% of the economy effectively, so a relatively small part. The G though, that feels like there's some more juice
something there.
Yeah, that's not over. I mean, because that goes back to the infrastructure legislation, that goes to the CHIPS Act, that goes to the Inflation Reduction Act. And I think we've done a lot of work in this area, that the maximal impact from those pieces of legislation on the economy, on GDP, isn't for another year, maybe even as you move into 2025. So that could be a pretty significant tailwind, for most of 24 going into 25. On the net exports, that I think is a wash. One quarter might be up a little, one quarter down a little bit. Maybe because the U.S. economy is so strong and the rest of the global economy not quite so much, and the U.S. dollar is very, very strong against most currencies. It might be a small drag on growth, but I don't know that it's going to be a factor one way or the other in driving things.
So going back to the G a moment, the government side of this, I believe it was about a 50-50 split between federal and state and local contributions to the 0.8% growth. Given your analysis here of the federal contribution, do you expect, so that's what, about 0.4%? Do you expect that to actually increase going into 2024 here substantially, or?
Yeah, meaningfully. I think we're going to get more. We'll probably get less out of state and local. The state and local, I think, is benefiting from the American Rescue Plan that was passed back in the early part of the Biden administration. There was $500 billion in aid to state and local government. The $550 billion of which, if memory serves, was for schools, education. But you still had, a ton of cash going to state and local governments that they could spend out, through this. I think all the way through. I think it's through the end of this year, maybe even into 2024. So I think that's what we're seeing in the state and local government numbers. But that'll start to fade. But the federal government, that I think we got more coming there. More support coming there, at least through the end of 24 going into 25. Okay. It just feels like a very, it's hard not to take solace in the report, right? I mean, it's really strong growth, it's very broad-based. It feels like it's on pretty solid ground. It just feels like we're in a pretty good place. The one potential concern is in the context of the worries about inflation and the fact that the economy is at full employment is actually now it's flipping around. It's not the recession immediately. It's the potential for the economy heating back up again, the Fed having to raise rates again. And of course, that would be a problem down the road for the economy. But I don't think we're there yet. I mean, because the inflation numbers were pretty good. They felt pretty good. So I took a lot of solace in the report. Of course, I've been taking a lot of solace in all the reports recently, but I think that it's hard not to like what we saw here. You know, it was pretty darn good. Okay, anything else on the GDP report we want to bring up? Marisa, you did mention in our conversation before we went on about the income side of the GDP accounts. We got some data with regard to personal income and
Oh, that's right.
saving rates. Did you want to just mention that before we
The
move on?
personal disposable income actually fell
Real.
over the quarter. Real personal disposable income fell over the quarter, which, you know, seems to be somewhat at odds with the boom in consumer spending that we got. And this also implies that the savings rate also fell over the quarter.
Right. Okay, but you don't, I mean, because your argument was that real incomes have been rising, but that one quarter you're not putting that much weight on. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. And I'll also say, you know, if you look at the personal consumption expenditures deflator, I mean, that if you strip out food and energy from it, it was 2.4% in the third quarter. So it is clearly on a downward trajectory, core inflation. So that's good news.
Okay. I don't know if I mentioned this up top, but I did say it was Thursday evening and we're all pretty hungry. I don't know. Did you guys eat dinner yet? Marissa, it's early for you, but
yeah, it's not.
Chris, he's European. He eats at 10 p.m. anyway. So
no problem. Let's keep going.
But I'm starving.
Let's go the distance.
And I know Franco and Sarah are like, what's going on? This is crazy. You know, you guys are doing it this late. So we'll keep this as a short podcast. So let's move on to the game, the stats game. So we each pick a statistic. The rest of us figure it out through cues and deductive reasoning and clues. The best statistic is one that's not so easy, we get it immediately. One that's not so hard, we never get it. And one, if it's related to the topic at hand, that's great. And we always begin with you, Marissa. So Marissa, you're up. What's your statistic?
Okay, it's 3.9%.
Okay, this is definitely some kind of head fake. It's in the GDP number.
It is in the GDP number, and we talked about it.
And we did talk about it, the 3.9%, 3.9% positive. That was our tracking estimate for GDP, wasn't it?
It was, but that's not what
That's
thinking.
not what you're thinking. Is it a component of GDP?
It is.
A growth rate in the component of GDP.
That's right.
It is. It's it's not in consumption part of the accounts? No.
Oh, well, that's where I was going.
Yeah. Okay, we can do the C+I+G. Is it in the investment part of the account?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, 3.9%. Is it in business?
We talked about it.
Is in business?
We did talk about it. Yeah.
We did. In the residential investment?
That's what it is, right? It's
residential investment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ding, ding,
ding, ding, ding. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. Why'd you pick that?
I picked it just because it was kind of this outlier in terms of recent history. It was strongly positive for the first time in 9 quarters. You have to go back to the beginning of 2021 to get positive contribution from housing, from the GDP report. So I also picked it because we've gotten a lot of listener questions about housing and what our outlook is for housing. I mean, we've been saying it sort of looks like housing has bottomed and there's some signs of renewed strength in housing, and perhaps we're not going to see a 5 to 10% decline in house prices. And here's some confirmation that housing did perk up a little bit, at least from where it was off of a bottom over the summer.
Got it. But this is definitely not going to continue, right, Chris?
Definitely not.
Yeah, definitely.
What with mortgage rates flirting with 8%.
Yeah, after we play the game, I want to come back and I want to talk about the outlook in the context of
this. Okay.
Yeah, of all this. Yeah. So but that was a good one. Okay, Chris, you're up. What's your stat?
28%.
28%.
Yes.
Is it from the GDP report?
Nope.
Oh.
Is it a government statistic?
It is.
Did it come out this week?
It did. Came out today, earlier today.
That's not fair because I've been traveling and board meetings all day. What else?
No
The
excuse.
UI claims came out. Oh, durable goods came out.
Oh no, I'm sorry, yesterday, not today.
Oh, okay.
So it's fair
Is
game.
it housing related?
It is very good.
28%.
What came out? New home sales and
New home
New
sales.
sales, right?
Related to
Right.
new home sales.
They were strong, actually.
Very
Well, it's not
incredibly strong.
It's not the increase in new home sales, is it?
No.
That'd be
crazy.
Yeah.
It's very specific. Do you give up? You got the new home sales. That's really where. No, you're not ready yet.
Is it on the single family side?
Well,
It
it's new
is.
home sales.
It is. Yeah, it's new home sales.
It's new home sales. By definition, yes, it is single. She's stalling. Can you tell that?
I got it. I got it.
Yeah, you see. Has it
Is
something
it the
with,
share of first-time home buyers?
It is a share. It is not first-time home buyers.
Is it a share that are regional? Is it regional or is it price point?
Price point.
Oh, 28% are above.
Below.
Oh, below. That's what I meant. Below 300,000. 500,000.
500. Very good. Perfect. You got it. You got it. 28% of new home sales below 500,000. That's up from 24% last year.
Wow.
So we're moving in the right direction in terms of, the new home sales we have, the new construction we have is shifting a bit towards the lower end of the market, which we absolutely need. So I found that I took some encouragement, some solace in that.
Prices are coming down of new homes.
Right. Well, the distribution is shifting, right? But yes.
But also prices have come down.
Prices of new home, even on the same right, because of the higher interest rate, you do have more buy downs and concessions being made. But so
do you know builders are using so-called interest rate buy downs to try to sell homes. So they take a point or two off the mortgage rate for a year or two to effectively lower the cost, at least initially, to the borrower or to the buyer and try to sell the home. It's effectively cutting price.
Yes.
Is that in these prices? Do you know? Does the census, which is the source of the data, Bureau of Census, do they capture the buy downs as in the price, or is just that the list, kind of the list price?
That's my understanding, that it is captured.
Oh, it is captured.
Because that the concessions are
in there
now.
Okay,
interesting. Or I guess controlled for, I should say.
This might be a good time. Shandor, one of our colleagues, sent an email today with our September house price index estimates across states and metropolitan areas. Maybe you want to mention that, Cris.
Yeah, showing renewed strength, or continued strength in the housing market. What was it, about up 0.99%?
Yeah, in the month,
right? On a month, and I believe on the year over year was close to 4.5%, if I'm not mistaken. So you do have renewed strength in the housing market, given the limited inventories. I chalk it up to the very low levels of homes available for sale. There are buyers still out there, of course, who may pay in cash or who can afford a higher interest rate, and they are still bidding up the prices for the homes that do hit the market. So it is a bit of this tug of war now between first-time home buyers, other home buyers that are locked out of the market because of the high interest rate, and the limited inventory because of the lock-in effect of homeowners. So you got these two forces playing against each other. I still believe that, provided the interest rates remain elevated, that eventually you will see more and more sellers having to make price concessions, because you just won't have the pool of buyers out there willing to pay top dollar. So I'm still of the belief that we'll see some slowdown in home prices, but clearly right now you're continuing to see some strength out there in the current market.
Okay. I'll give you my statistic. Two numbers, 4.9 and 2.4.
4.9 is the GDP growth rate.
It is indeed. Is that your guess?
Yes.
Okay, that's right.
That's right. And
Come on, Mark.
2.4, I think we mentioned, isn't that the core PCE
Yeah,
inflation?
it is.
Is that your guess?
That is my guess.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I guess that was too easy.
A little bit of a layup there, I would say.
I'm getting tired.
It was so easy that it was difficult for me.
That's right. That's right. That's the only way I can punk Marisa is like
It was totally stumped.
totally stumped. Yeah, 4924. Here's why I picked it. Strong growth, low inflation. We can have both. Of course, we can't maintain 4.9. That I'm not arguing, but it does highlight why the prospects of recession feel like they're receding, and that is inflation is coming in despite strong growth. We're getting pretty solid growth. You can see it in the GDP number, you can see it in the labor market, you can see it in a lot of different statistics. But despite that, inflation is coming in. And that goes back to something we've been talking about for a long time, and that is the reason for the high inflation was the supply shocks of the pandemic and the Russian war. And as those two, the economic fallout from those two shocks continue to fade, and people forget they're still having impacts. I won't go to how, but in lots of different ways. But they are fading, and as they fade, inflation can come in, and we don't need to see a weak economy, or even certainly not a recessionary economy, or even a weak economy. And I think that's highlighted quite nicely in the third quarter GDP report. Okay, let's go back. And I know I did promise we're going to end this at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. Let's power through for another 5-10 minutes because I do want to talk about what does this all mean for the future, the economic outlook. And Cris, let me turn back to you and let you lead the way here. What is, you've been more worried about the economy's prospects and recession risks. Has anything changed here because of the numbers we've been getting in recently in the GDP? Are you still relatively pessimistic or nervous about the economy's prospects going forward? By the way, I just wanted to point out this. I just saw this. Someone texted me. Do you remember back when Bloomberg said 100% chance of recession?
Yeah, a year ago. Right?
Yeah, it was exactly a year ago, and it said in the coming year there's 100% probability of recession. So we got to be humble, but definitely
Absolutely.
very wrong. So with that as a preface, turn it back to you. Just saying, is your thinking here changed at all because of the numbers we're getting, or is it, or are you still feeling like things could go off the rails here?
There's clearly more resilience in the numbers than what I had seen originally. I think even more than the GDP report from today is more the what did we see in the income and the savings previously, right? We found that there was more income, there's more excess savings out there. So that would argue that the consumer is in better shape overall than what had previously been thought. But I guess I still remain nervous. Delinquency rates, right? With some of the other things we talked about last week in terms of, there are some cracks in the foundation here. And we are calling for a slowdown in the economy. And I do fear that it wouldn't take much of something else, right? So if nothing else changes and we're continuing on this path, no problem. But again, I come back to this idea that, there are other things out there that could hit the economy. You don't have a lot of ammunition to fight them in terms of either additional fiscal policy or monetary policy, really. And so we are vulnerable over this next, say, 6-12 months here. So I would mark down my recession odds, but still, I think they're likely still a bit higher than yours.
Here's the weird thing. The concern that I had was, coming into the current quarter, the fourth quarter, given those headwinds that are, out there and developing. You mentioned student loan payments, UAW strike, potential government shutdown, the run up in long-term interest rates, mortgage rates at 8%, oil prices that feels a little less threatening at the moment, but that's always a threat.
Yeah. Anything could happen.
The economy would really slow here towards the end of the year going into next, and it would be vulnerable, as you said, to anything else that can go wrong. But it almost feels like the risks are on the opposite end of the spectrum, that the economy, what if it just stays really strong? It's, because things could break a different way. There's some more positive talk coming out of the UAW negotiations with the automakers. Didn't they just come to terms with Ford or something?
Ford.
Yeah, I saw that while I was in transit. There may not be a federal government shutdown, given the new House Speaker. Still a lot of risk around that, but maybe not. And so far, the student loan payments, that's happened already. It's already happening. And I don't sense it. I don't see it. I don't feel it. Now, maybe it's premature. It probably is, but maybe not. And I mentioned oil prices, they're back into the mid 80s, and gas prices are actually down, right? Because of seasonality and crack spreads and coming in. The only thing that's kind of moving in the wrong direction here in terms of growth is long-term interest rates. But as we talked about last week, or maybe it was a couple of weeks ago, it feels like the economy is more resistant to, for lots of different reasons, to the higher interest rates, at least for a while. So maybe the concern shouldn't be that the economy kind of slumps here. Maybe the worry should be it stays too strong here. It's, we're not going to get 4.9 in the fourth quarter. But what if we got 3.0, and unemployment started going down again, and the Fed felt like, inflation kind of stopped improving, and the Fed felt like it had to raise interest rates. So it's almost like the risks the kind of shifting here. But what do you think of that?
Yeah, so still risk of recession, but maybe Fed induced at that point, right?
Further down the road, maybe.
Further down the road, right?
Further down the road.
The timing gets pushed out. So.
And all those economic forecasters, and you would have been one of them, my friend, would have had negative numbers that keep pushing them out, right? And that they would have to push it. They'll have to push them out some more. So
anyway. Hey, you either get the magnitude or you get the timing. Choose one.
Fair enough. I should ask, just make it concrete. I think you've been at 45% probability of recession through the end of next year. Is that still the case?
I would knock it down to 40.
40. Okay, 40.
Because of those timing issues.
All right, Marisa, what do you think?
It's been a while since you asked me this.
Yeah.
Through the end of next year.
Yeah, that's not much harder than through this time next year. I'm just saying. I mean,
well,
something's going to blow up in December 2024.
Let's see. This is right before an election.
Okay. Oh, that's
yeah.
I didn't factor that in. Maybe I need to factor that in.
That's an interesting point.
I may need to adjust.
Yeah.
I'll say 30%.
30. Okay. All right.
And even that feels a little high to me.
At this point, it feels high to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Any particularly anything you're particularly looking at that has made you feel a little bit more confident, or it's just kind of the plethora of data out there?
Yeah, it's the plethora of data. I think the Fed is done. And the economy just seems to be just absorbing all of this with a ton of resiliency, and it's pretty remarkable, actually. Yeah. Now, I don't think that that's going to last, right? Like, I don't think the growth that we're seeing right now, the labor market strength, I don't think that we're going to be talking about these same numbers a year from now. But recession, or outright recession, just seems it's very difficult in my mind to get there from where we are right here in the span of a year.
Yeah. Okay.
Unless something really goes terribly awry.
Here's the other reason for a little bit of and by the way, I'm down to 25% this year. That's the lowest I've been in a long time.
Yeah.
It's still high. I mean, typical economy would be 15. We get a recession once every 6-7 years, but 25 is still high, but it's come in. Here's the other thing, we could be surprised on the upside here. We've always, it feels like for the longest time, we're always focused on the downside risks to the economy. Could be that things turn out to be much better than anticipated. And it goes to the supply side. We talked about this too, the supply side of the economy. You can feel it, you can see it clearly in the labor supply data. The labor force growth has been very strong. About 250,000, 275,000 people every single month are coming into the labor force. That supports a lot of job growth and keeps unemployment low without, labor markets tightening and wage and price pressures developing. But take a look at that GDP number, 4.9, and then calculate the number of hours worked. It's nowhere even close. That means productivity growth really increased pretty dramatically in the quarter. And that's on top of some better productivity numbers we've been getting over the past several quarters. So it feels like we're getting some real pickup here in underlying productivity growth. Yeah, and it may go to the fact that we saw so many people quit their jobs back a year or two ago, and now they're in jobs that they're more suited to. There's surveys from the Conference Board that show people are really happy with their jobs, at the highest level of job satisfaction in the history of the survey. And that goes to people, getting jobs that are suited to their skill sets and better pay. It may go to remote work. I know there's a lot of debate and we need a lot more data points, but I just feel like that's got to be a productivity enhancing, especially as new businesses form and they optimize around remote work as opposed to working in the office. And I know I'm sure it's too early, but AI has got to also be important, and artificial intelligence also got to be important in terms of this. So this feels like we're getting some real positive news coming out of the supply after all this very negative supply side of news because of the pandemic and Russian war. Now we're getting some really positive supply side. And what that means is, couldn't ask for better, right? That means more growth without inflation. I mean, it's exactly what you want. So it's almost like we got to start thinking about the upside scenarios here. It's not just about the downside. It's not asymmetric risk. There's also a risk to and in fact, it's so weird. For the longest time, I've been berated for being too optimistic. Now I'm starting to get criticized for being too pessimistic. It's really interesting phenomenon, a really interesting phenomenon. Anyway, so I'd say I'm feeling pretty good about things at this point. I think we're in a pretty good spot. Okay, I promised this was going to be a short podcast. I did down this beer as we were chatting, so
on an empty stomach.
Yeah, and you can feel I was quite lugubrious, not lugubrious. I was quite loquacious is the word, loquacious.
Mm-hmm.
No, you think so? No.
Yeah, in a good way.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, in a way. Exactly. Okay. Anything else you guys want to say? You let me go on a bit of a rant there, but
and the Phillies lost, so that's another.
Oh, that's right.
That's right.
No recession.
Another reason to be optimistic.
Another reason to be optimistic.
That's the reason that GDP grew.
Exactly.
4.9% in the third quarter.
Yeah.
Because we're not in a recession.
Yeah, we could have predicted that. Okay. All righty. Okay. Hearing nothing else, I think we're going to call this a podcast. Talk to you next week, dear listener. Take care now.